So today's topic, hauntings in the South. So where did you want to start? I mean, I've got a couple of stories for sure, personal experiences. But if we want to start somewhere else, yeah, you were going to go to Savannah, I believe, or some
Yeah.
like that. So we best go to Savannah because the picture that I posted in the link to the show from today is from Savannah.
Oh, okay.
So we'll start in Savannah.
Okay.
All right.
So, the first location is called the Sorrel Weed House.
Ah, okay. There we go. He's wearing the t-shirt and everything.
We've
Look
got
at
a
him.
T-shirt from the museum that's there now, and
I have not been there.
I haven't either. It was my cousin actually
Uh,
who was there, and she was tweeting and saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna go off on all these ghost tours all around Savannah. And I said, well, you got to bring me back a T-shirt or something. So she
yeah.
did, and I got this
So
Sorrel
all
Weed
we got
House
in Savannah was this haunted
T-shirt.
t-shirt.
Yeah, haunted T-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the Sorrel Weed House, um, it's a historic property that is preserved within that downtown historic district within
Okay.
Savannah, and it's located in what they call Madison Park or Madison Square. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Madison Square, which is I've seen pictures, and it really is a very beautiful, picturesque park area.
Mm-hmm.
And this park was the site of the siege of Savannah in 1779 during the
Ah.
the Revolutionary War, and that battle claimed over 1,000 lives in just a couple of hours. So, because of all of this, it's known to be a source of paranormal activity within that area.
Okay.
And it was it was British property at the time, and they had a soldiers' barracks built on the site where the house now sits. And the house was built in 1838 by Francis Sorrel. Um, I'm not sure where the weed comes in with that because it's Francis Sorrel. He was a wealthy shipping merchant, and he had built this house for his wife. And when the house was being built, they uncovered the remains of British soldiers from that battle.
Okay, so
Uh,
wait, what battle is this?
the siege of Savannah.
Oh, so was this around the time of the War of 1812 or when?
The American Revolutionary War,
Oh, okay, okay.
1779.
Right, right. Okay, so the Rev War. All right,
Yeah.
makes sense.
So there they are now. Years have gone by. We're in 1838. They're building this house, and they uncover these remains of these British soldiers, uniforms, buttons,
Hmm.
weapons, um, and they still believe today that there's still more buried underneath the house.
Right.
Um, so, excuse me. So, like a lot of the other wealthy Southern families, the Sorrels had slaves, and it's told that Mr. Sorrel was caught having sex with one of the young female slaves, and he was
Hmm.
caught by his wife,
What a
who
surprise.
who apparently actually walked in on them while they were having sex, and she was just apparently so distraught from this event that she went and committed suicide. And afterwards, this young slave girl was found hanging by a noose up in the rafters of the slave quarters. So it was never determined, did she commit suicide? Was she murdered by Mr. Sorrell to cover up, what would have been a huge scandal at the time? And so there's you've got all of this. You've got the soldiers, you've got the battle, you've got these events that took place in the house, and this affair between Mr. Sorrell and this young woman. This is actually documented. This isn't just
right,
rumors that have developed over the years. This actually comes from letters that have come down through the family over the years.
Well, it's hardly surprising. I mean, let's face it, in that antebellum period when, people were enslaved, it was a fairly typical, I hate to say it, common thing for, these men who would take advantage and rape these women frequently. I mean, I like how they say affair, to make it sound like it's consensual. Right, but probably 9 times out of 10, it was not consensual.
As they're taking advantage of them, yeah.
Oh, for sure, and it's pretty disgusting, but we know that it happens, and to cover it up is, to me, a bigger criminal offense than to let it out and let people know the kinds of things that happened. But yeah, it's interesting. So you were saying about the name of the house. So I did actually find out why it's called Weed. So what it was is it's the Sorrell Weed House. And like you said, built by Sorrell originally. But in 1859, there was a purchase agreement made between Savannah businessman Henry D. Weed, and he took possession of the house in 1862. And it remained lived until 1901. But this is, I guess, in 1859, this was when Henry Weed took possession of the home. So that is why it has that, the 2 names attached to it at this point.
Okay.
So that was my bit of research there.
All right. So to continue with as to why this house is considered to be one of actually the most haunted buildings in all of Savannah. So you've got the soldiers, you've got the events that took place in the house. Francis Sorrell's oldest son was a surgeon, and he turned the basement of the house into this great big surgery room. And I'm not exactly sure what time period this was. Was he doing civilian medical operations, or was he doing military surgeons or military surgeries during that Civil War period?
Except that Weed had purchased the house already by that point, right? Because Weed purchases the house in 1862.
So it must have been civilian operations that he was doing then.
Interestingly enough, because I mean, at this point in time, as we know, as far as the medical, procedures, and that you paid to get your doctor's, title. I mean, there wasn't really any practice of surgery or anything at this point, and especially if it's prior to Civil War. I mean, there's some really horrific stories about, surgeries in the Civil War, and in particular, there's a very interesting story that we should talk about at another time about a gentleman who was a doctor who, essentially went on to spend a great deal of time at Broadmoor and, the asylum in England, and was a contributor to the Oxford Dictionary. But that's a very interesting story and tied to the Civil War. So it's kind of questionable to me then exactly what was happening in terms of, being a surgeon, or I mean, obviously doctors existed to a degree, but a lot of times, even in that early a period, I mean, even like 1812 and, up until like 1830, a lot of times if you needed surgery, your surgeon was a dentist, sometimes even the veterinarian. So if at least they were the veterinarian, I would go, okay, good, because at that time, for a veterinarian, you had to apprentice for 5 years. But to be a doctor, you just had to buy your way through school. So, sort of an interesting, it's sort of an interesting juxtaposition there, right? I think that, it's rather questionable who or what he would be doing in terms of surgeries, right?
Yeah,
So
I'm sure a lot of them didn't end too well.
probably not, but I think that, that's one of those stories where it's really hard to validate. And yeah, I mean, it makes for a good story to attach to the house. And he could have been a doctor. He could have very easily been a doctor and perhaps performed even maybe just minor surgeries in the home, right? But probably set up a practice in the basement of the house. And that's sort of where the story of surgery, can kind of grows from there, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, interesting though. I mean, obviously the energy in the house and the things, I mean, I always look at it this way. I don't think there's a plantation in the South, and I'm going to say it, that it can possibly escape the horrors of people who suffered greatly at the hands of plantation owners.
Oh,
So,
exactly.
so I mean, I'm sure this is another location that is equally as, disturbing in those regards.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
it probably carries a lot of energy and residual energy. Just
I
that,
think there's a lot of residual energy there. Yeah.
probably, yeah, it would be pretty. I've been to some of the southern plantations, and I can tell you they're not, to me, they feel horribly oppressive and very, I don't, I get different feelings at different locations, but we'll talk about that when I when I talk about my thing. But I've been to Savannah, but I was a kid the last time I was in Savannah. I think I was maybe 14. So I don't really remember much about Savannah. I remember a lot of the old, beautiful, sort of antebellum homes in the old part of Savannah. But ghost tours and that weren't a big thing in 1977. So, there
No,
was
that's a more recent thing.
yeah, there was some historical things. And I remember us going on a historical walking tour, but they didn't touch on any ghosts or hauntings or anything like that at that time. And I haven't been back since. So, but it was a pretty place to visit. But I certainly, even at that age, remember feeling very overwhelmed by a lot of the energy in some areas that we were in. So
Yeah.
but interesting that, and I know there's a lot of other places now, like Savannah has quite a number of ghost tours and haunted tours, and, obviously taking advantage of that tourism aspect of things,
Oh,
right? I
sure.
run haunted tours
Yeah.
myself. So, and there's likely quite a number of very true and real hauntings and or stories that go with it. So